Hello everyone, I'm Sandeep Tripathi, co-founder and CEO of Your Engineer. I hope I'm audible to you. Welcome everyone in this session of legal landscape for student startups. Well, you all know that now startups are not only for the people who have passed out, who have graduated, or who are experienced. Now each and every student is planning to do a startup. They have the ideas in their colleges. They are due to the digital footprint, due to the digital infrastructure of India, they are now starting the startups from this students level as well. About what's going to happen, right? So today is our guest, Miss Rashna Jehani, founder of Jehani Legal, and she will be telling us about the legal landscape and how to build a foundation for the student startups. So if any student is building a startup, if any professional is building a startup, what should be the legal landscape? How to start to scale? What can be done? And at every stages, what can be the legal perspective, legal foundation? So welcome, Rashna. Welcome to the session.
Thank you so much, Sandeep, for this introduction, and I really look forward to participating in the session today.
Yeah. Okay. So we have many participants joining in, Rashna. In the meantime, can you briefly introduce us about what was your journey like, and how was your journey, and how you are helping startups?
Sure. So I have about 10 plus years of experience in corporate law. I advise companies, MNCs, which in relation to like their mergers, acquisitions, strategic turnarounds like their slump sale or business transfer agreements. And another area of law that I am very passionate about is mainly the space of startups. So I have been advising quite a bit of them right from the time of, helping them structure or formulate their entity to helping them navigate how it is that they should go about with getting investments, helping them with their diligence, structuring their transaction documents, and of course, then with their regulatory compliances as well.
That's great. That's great, Rashna. So, can you tell us about what is the current state of the student startups? As I mentioned earlier, that students are now doing startups, and there's no limit because initially it was called like people you must have some experience to start a business. It was the tradition, but nowadays people have an idea to start a business, and that idea they are executing in the college itself. So how can that particular ecosystem grow more, and how is that growing? So what is the current ecosystem that you are seeing in the case of startups?
Right. So, like you correctly mentioned, there has been quite a significant shift with regards to the kind of, people or students, so to say, who are looking at formulating these startups. And a very high contributing factor, I would say, for this it has been the startup ecosystem. And when we say in terms of startup ecosystem, we're talking about the requisite support that it's receiving on the regulatory front, be it the incubators, be it just that entrepreneurial spirit, which is very high amongst the youth today. So that I feel is contributing a lot. So if we are to talk about the current era, we're definitely witnessing a significant rise in the startups. So just in terms of statistics, we were about 700 startups in about 2016 and 17, which is registered with the DPIIT. And now, if you were to look at the figures in 2020 to 23, there's been about a 196% increase. So right now we're talking about 96,000 plus startups. So if you were to compare, and this is about what, 7 years that we're talking about. So the rise has been magnificent. Of course, like I mentioned, it's been because of this entire support of the startup ecosystem that has been helping this particular increase. And apart from that, also, if we were to look at the whole advent of the technology, which I feel like the online platforms, something like the session that we're having today, the kind of information which is being imparted even through social media has made it very easy for student entrepreneurs to actually reach out to a wider audience and in turn gain recognition for the ventures that they intend to take up.
Yeah, that's great. But what happens now, Rashna, that whenever they are starting in the college or whenever any new person is starting a startup, generally they get the whole idea of this startup world or the limelight of it and everything through the social media, but not the exact information that they need. Whenever like incorporating a company, there has been a lot of doubts. Many people have asked me how to incorporate. If I'm starting this, then how to incorporate. If I'm doing this like a retail store, like a e-commerce website, or suppose someone is starting something in supply chain management or any sector. For any sector, if they are trying to start anything, there are different types of incorporation. And it's quite tough for them to grasp it because they don't have the experience of that, and they didn't have the ecosystem for that also. you know so yes, this session is definitely helping them so that they get an exposure about all those things in the college itself, right? So what challenges can they face if they don't have the legal foundation from the beginning?
Right. So, like you correctly mentioned, I think from at least the formulation point of view and from the regulatory and the legal health point of view, it's very important for you to have that kind of correct advice right from the beginning. I'll definitely be happy to discuss why is it important to actually build a strong legal foundation, because on a going forward basis, when you are looking at a market which is very dynamic, you are looking at something, you're looking at wanting to be agile, it's very important that you have a strong foundation in place so that you can adapt to the changing situations without really then facing more difficulties. Of course, thereafter, from the investor's perspective, in order to showcase and demonstrate your credibility, a formulated startup would definitely help. Thereafter, what I feel is, apart from that, there are, like you mentioned, quite a few of these difficulties which a startup would face. One is, of course, the primary one would be your limited financial resources, which I feel would pose, which I feel even today pose a big challenge to the founders, because they're still sort of just starting out. They don't really have a lot of financial backing, so they would depend on their personal savings. They would depend on friends, family, maybe even angel investors. So it would be very important for them at that point of time to find those correct funding opportunities, as well as undertake managing their finances in quite a lean manner, because that is something which would be crucial for them in order to sustain the business as well as grow at the same time. The second point would, I feel, be the lack of industry experience, because they've just started out, so they may not really have that much of experience in actually running a business. So that could pose as some kind of an apprehension or a skepticism in the minds of the investors who are deciding whether or not they should be investing. And also the bit about balancing your time with regards to the work that you're undertaking, as well as juggling, say your studies or any other kind of ventures that you're looking at. So, because of course, when you have a startup, you are looking at setting it up, you're looking at running it. Again, you have your financial constraints. So you don't have too many resources to rely upon. So you're literally like a one-man show, which is where I feel the difficulty could arise. But having said that, like we discussed, building credibility is something important. That is something, if the startup founder is able to do right from the beginning, also establish a strong professional network for himself or herself, and seek out that kind of professional help or support on the legal front, on the finance front. And, of course, there will be failures, there will be setbacks, but to not really look at them as setbacks, but look at them as learning opportunity, that will definitely help them navigate their way through these challenges and thrive.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much for telling us about the challenges. And after the challenges, if they decides that they have to build a legal foundation, suppose they got an exposure and got the gap, that this is the gap that I'm having. Maybe this is the way I should go forward. So, what is the way to go forward? Like, suppose I have an idea as a student or as a newcomer. I have an idea, and then I have to convert that idea to the business. So what is the journey from idea to the business? Like, how can I start it?
Right, right. So I think, like we discussed, this is quite closely related to the entire question about how is it that we build that foundation in order to ensure that thereafter the scaling and the growing happens of that particular organization. So firstly, I would say it's very important to build a solid network, a solid framework for the business that you're looking at undertaking. So you ensure that your compliances are in place with regards to all of the relevant laws, and regulations. Of course, seek proper advice, like legal advisory in relation to ensuring that your formulation is done correctly, your incorporation is in place, and you're complying with all the necessary rules and laws which are specifically related to your business. Secondly, I would say setting up an appropriate structure would help you very much with regards to protecting your own personal assets, limiting your liabilities, and managing your risks appropriately. So that is something which is very important from the formulation perspective. Thirdly, again, making sure that all of your contracts, your agreements are correctly in place. This again will help you to ring fence your liability, your risks, as well as protect your rights. We've, I think, seen from the Facebook disputes which happened, which was of course finally settled out of court. But the main contention over there was, between Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss, who said that who both disputed that they were the owners of the idea. And it was because there was no agreement in place between them at the time of them having founded it from a dormitory. It was their word against the other person's. So instead of that, if they would have an actual agreement done between co-founders, which would specifically lay out that, this is what I'm bringing to the table, this is what you are bringing to the table, and crystal clearly lay out each one's rights and obligations, the scope of them being a litigation or the same overlapping would be minimized to a very, I would say, large extent. Thereafter, also having a good legal foundation, like I've mentioned earlier also, would be with regards to demonstrating your credibility to the investors, because it showcases that you are committed from a long-term perspective with regards to undertaking this business in a sustainable manner as well. So again, just to sum this up, it's important that you have a strong legal foundation right from the beginning, because it, like I said, lays a good foundation. You are able to enhance your credibility to your investors, your growth prospects in line with the dynamic nature of the market do not get stalled, and in the long term also you are then able to sustain.
Yeah, but Rasna, there's a very less financial literacy. There is very less legal literacy in the case of the general audience. So when suppose I have an idea and I want to start a bank account, which bank account should I start? Which particular type of incorporation should I do? Whether I should open it as self-employed, and whether I should start a partnership or one-person company or private limited or maybe LLPs. So what are those things? And well, many of the creators, many of the influencers, they are trying to educate it, but it's again kind of creating an ecosystem where they are making it more and more confused. Because when you see the videos and when you have the real practical experience, they both are very different. In videos we can get considered, yes, if you have this, then you should do the private limited. But whether a startup has value, a founder sees the value that that this particular startup may have the value. So rather than going for a partnership, let's go for the private limited. Or like someone may try this like, okay, let's try this for 1 year. If it, like you said, the long-term commitment. So sometimes what happens that they generally don't have the long-term commitment. Sometimes long-term commitment also fall off because they don't have the founders agreement in the place. And after 1 year, they just get bored or they just don't see the future and they fall out. So many of the cases happens generally in the case of students that startups fail before even getting exposed to the investors. They just die in the college. So what about that? How can we solve that kind of challenges?
Sure. So, like you mentioned, we have thankfully a variety of legal structures that each founder can sort of select from in order to incorporate themselves as an entity. So basically, when we say incorporate themselves as an entity, we say that we formulate a structure wherein the business that we decide to start is going to be independent of the person who's starting it. And the main reason why we want to do that is because we want to alienate ourselves from the risk that that particular business is going to be taking up on a personal level. So it is then going to be that all of the business that the person is undertaking is going to be in the company's name, of the company, for the company, and by the company. It's literally going to be like that.
Yeah.
Now, of course, company is like one kind of an entity which I mentioned. Under our laws, we are permitted to incorporate this in various forms. So you could have like something which is as simple and vanilla as like a sole proprietorship. We could have a one-person company that is the equivalent of a sole proprietorship under your Companies Act. We could have a limited liability partnership. We could have a traditional partnership framework, a private limited company, and thereafter, once the company scales up, we could have a public, a listed company as well. And we also have that option of actually converting from like an LLP to a private limited company as well. Now, the question you may ask me, Rashna, yeah, okay, now these are so many options, but now which one should I pick? So when it comes to that, what we need to do is ask ourselves a couple of questions, and thereafter, once we are able to answer those questions, we take the call as to which specific entity should we go for with regards to the incorporation. So in my view, the most important question would be the risk-taking capacity of that particular individuals. So in case of say, where the risk capacity is high, you could go in for a sole proprietorship. If the liability that you want to take with regards to the business is fairly limited, I would suggest going for an OPC, which is your one-person company. Go in for, but again, that is only when it's a sole proprietor. If there's more than one person involved, go in for a limited liability partnership. You always have an option of converting it later into a private limited company. Thereafter, the point to discuss is compliances, like how okay are you at this stage in order to undertake compliances. For a sole proprietorship, there wouldn't be any compliance requirements. For an LLP, there would be fairly moderate. For a private limited company, maybe a little bit more. Then again, transferability. How much investment are you looking at? If you're looking at a high level of investment right from the beginning, you may want to demonstrate to the investors, the credibility and the longevity that you yourself are willing to undertake for the business for the next, say, 10 years, 15 years. And thereafter, then in that case, having a private limited company right from the beginning would make more sense.
Yeah, that's great. But in that particular cases, when we have decided that this should be our legal foundation. So how to approach, and like you can say that taking consultation from a lawyer, and then start by incorporating everything, by putting it our bank account and each out everything. But what about updates? What about keeping it updated every month, or keep yourself updated about what are the new things happening? Like you said in the starting also that it's dynamic in nature. Startups are dynamic in nature, laws are dynamic in nature. So how to keep yourself updated with all those things that are changing, and how whatever is changing is valued for me, valuable for me. So how can we decide that particular thing?
Right. So I think it's important for us to understand two things. One is with regards to your legal rights that you will be able to attain through, say, a contract or an agreement. And the next is you are ring fencing your rights as well as liabilities by undertaking certain compliances. So these are two baskets of, when we're talking about law. Of course, it's going to be a little bit daunting on a founder when we're looking at complying with various regulatory compliances, because there are quite a few of them. We're looking at like environmental compliances, labor laws, employment related, company related, corporate governance, etc. So in order to mitigate that aspect of daunting compliance, it's always better to have on board a lawyer who would say be like someone who's your retainer, who will undertake this kind of compliance activities for you on periodical basis. So it could be, again, depending on what the compliance requirement is, say if it is quarterly or yearly or even half yearly, that particular advisor on your behalf will undertake it for you. Having said that, like I mentioned, there are certain contractual rights as well. That is something that you will be upfront, aware of once you enter into that contract, and once the lawyer who represents you in that particular transaction undertakes it for you. And this, of course, also includes your rights as, say, a founder, your rights as a shareholder, say your intellectual property rights when you're getting your trademarks or your patents registered with the concerned authorities. So all in all, yes, the legal landscape can be complex and daunting, like I mentioned, but seeking the right legal advice and along with establishing a strong legal foundation, which in turn will make sure that your compliance happens on a day-to-day basis and it's not just a one-off event.
Okay. That's great. But to our audience who have joined or who will be seeing this on the YouTube after we will upload it, can you tell us the journey from start to scale? Like you also mentioned, but can we go step by step, like starting of the business and scaling it till the IPO? So what are the stages, and how all those things changes from starting to scale? So like angel investment, then VC investment comes in, then various rounds of investment come in. Each and every round has their own implications, and then after that, when we do the IPO, we have various compliances and all. So how can a person have a long vision that I have to do 10 IPO in 10 years or 7 years? So what can be the foundation they can be building upon? So can we go step by step, and can you tell us in brief about each and everything?
Sure. So I think, like you mentioned, it's going to be a journey for a startup who has just started out, who's just incorporated themselves as, say, an LLP or even a private limited company, to finally scale it up, and eventually that startup's dream would be to file for an IPO. So it will be a gradual and an organic process. Of course, it is going to involve several rounds of fundings. It's going to
Yes.
require a sufficient amount of capital because that is what the company will need in order to grow, expand, etc. This is going to be definitely, I think, an exciting time for the company because they're looking at multiple stages of fundings, which are going to require different levels of, say, compliances, strategic decision making for them. So it has to be gradual, it has to be slow. In terms of, just to give an overview, of course, when the company is just starting out at the startup level, what they would be looking at is something called as your seed funding. And the seed funding would, of
Yeah.
course, be coming, even for that matter, a pre-seed funding round, as they sometimes typically call it, is going to involve investments or monies which are coming in through their own personal pockets, or say your friends or angel investors, as they call them, who are out there to not just put in the monies or the funds, but also advise them with regards to how to undertake the business and take it forward in exchange for some kind of an equity which is going to be offered to them in the company. And this is, I think, mainly at the stage where they've just started out, so you're trying to validate the concept, the business that you're undertaking, to garner that initial traction for the business that you wish to undertake further. The next stage of funding would, of course, be your VC funding, wherein you have these venture capitalists coming in. Venture capitalists are mainly, I think Sandeep, who would also know of this, that they're mainly firms who bet on very high growth companies, and they see that they see that potential in them, product wise or market fit wise, in terms of what the offerings are with regards to their services or their products. They feel that they're able to connect with them, on that ideological level with regards to taking that company to the next level. So I'm sure they would also focus on, again, growth, scalability, increasing their customer base, trying to seek how is it that they can strike that competitive advantage over what the other companies are doing in the market. And thereafter, of course, they would further gradually go on for a subsequent round of funding after their Series A is done. This could be, again, depending on the amount of funding, depending on who's participating, whether it's if the already existing investors are participating, it could be something like a rights issue. If it is a pure vanilla new round of funding, you could go in for a Series B, Series C. Sometimes it goes up to Series D funding as well. So this late stage funding is usually provided by these large institutional investors or private equity funds, as we know them, like somebody like a Blackstone.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is right. So it is at this stage, I feel, where the differentiating factor with regards to seeking funding would be the valuation part and the company's performance part. So it is at this stage that the company would actually have to demonstrate through their performance what the value of the company is, as opposed to the projections which the company would otherwise have to showcase at, say, the pre-seed level, or even for that matter, the VC level. And of course, I think after these, the final dream goal would be that of an IPO. So an IPO is a significant milestone in any startup's journey. This would, of course, be where the firm is looking, where the company is looking at initially. So, like the first time offering its shares to the public. And of course, but like I said, even for that particular IPOs, when the company reaches that IPO stage, it would be important for it to undertake certain regulatory compliances, make certain disclosures, file information with regards to its business models, projections, risks, growth, and all of this would be, of course, through the means of their prospectus that they would be filing with the Securities and Exchange Board of India. So, in summary, as the company would scale up, the scrutiny and the legal compliances would also increase. That's because the amount of money that is being invested is clearly increasing. So again, the best suggestion would be that right from the inception, it's better if you have a strong foundation in place, so that on a going forward basis, when you have to adjust yourself with regards to the changing environment, adapt yourself to the required needs, you're not facing too many issues because you already have that foundation in place where you've complied with what you needed to do at that point of time.
That's great. But about one more thing, it's a silly question, but it's been talked a lot. Valuations. Why? Because every company publishes this thing. Every news is publishing. That this is the valuation. This is the valuation. At this valuation, we are reaching this. This company has raised this at this valuation. So, as a startup founder, early stage, very early stage startup founder, has no idea of valuation. He's just seeing those things and dreaming that someday my company will also become 1,000 crore valued company. So, how can he see what should be his perspective of valuation? Like, how can I increase the value in my company so that valuation can increase? So, how can he see that from that? What should be his perspective about valuations?
So I think, like you correctly mentioned, companies' valuation, their stock performances, of course, are very important. Stock performances would, of course, come into play when the company is looking at market forces and investor sentiments. But otherwise, valuation of the company is very important. You want to understand that, there is a long-term value that you're trying to create for the shareholders. You want to continue driving the growth and success of a startup right from the initiation stage. So I guess how you can possibly do this is trying to build on the differentiating factor that you can demonstrate that your company has. Now, this could be done again through trying to display that you have a competitive advantage. So I'm talking about doing this at the initiation stage, wherein you don't necessarily have your performances in place to showcase how much of, say, revenue you've garnered or how much of margin you have made with regards to your business. So what you could do is the approach is, you take the valuation of similar companies which belong to the same industry, which are at the same stage of development. That could sort of work as a benchmark for you with regards to providing them with the kind of business model, with the kind of growth strategy that you have in place to showcase that, okay, this is how it is that you see the company go ahead and perceive it. Again, thereafter, the other thing would be to differentiate not just your growth strategy, but your product itself from the other kinds of products or services which are in place. That could be another approach that you could take. The other approach that I can think of is the cost bit, wherein you could demonstrate to them that you are really determined to work on a lean basis. In which case, the business that you're undertaking will be undertaken in a manner in which probably your competitor is sort of incurring greater cost than what you are incurring, which is how you're probably trying to cut down on costs or save on costs, especially when you're working at a time where the budget is sort of limited.
Yeah, that's great about valuations. One last thing I want to ask Shna about is that whenever any company starts, and as we have talked about various legal foundations, so there are two things. One company which has a good legal foundation, a student startup specifically, the person who didn't have the idea, he got the idea, he, upskilled himself, and he built that legal foundation. And the other company, which do not have legal foundation. So how a company which is having a legal foundation will have an extra edge? What will be the extra edge that the legal foundation companies will have over the companies which do not have any legal foundation?
Right. So, this is a very important question because I think this will help us just summarize the whole
Yeah.
session that we've had with regards to why is it that you should have a legal foundation, a legal
Yes.
structure in place. And this I feel is very important because, like I said, from the initiation of a particular startup. So when I talk about initiation, I mean the very inception of your business. You are laying that foundation which you need in order to undertake the business after that, right from the time of you being at the stage of startup, so say in the sense you're seeking your seed funding, to the time that you seek your venture capital funding, to the time that you seek your private equity funding, and finally an IPO. So this foundation is going to help you reach that throughout, all across, like transgress all your stages of growth, funding, etc. Also, it would be important that if you have a legal foundation and a legal landscape which is navigated well, you are going to be able to comply with all the legal requirements, compliances that you need to undertake, which is how you will then show your credibility. You will be able to demonstrate to the investors that what you need to do in order to comply with the laws has been done and the company is functioning in a manner that it's supposed to comply with. So that's again very important from the funding perspective. And lastly, which I feel is the most important, is having a strong legal foundation, in the sense a legal entity set up, will help you protect your own interests as, say, a founder or say a shareholder, an equity uh, person in the company, which will help you protect your own interests as well as mitigate the risks that will come your way when you're undertaking the business.
That's great. That's great. So as a summary, I can tell that every startup should build a legal foundation, because without any legal foundation, whatever the product is, whatever the idea is, or whatever their business model is, everything can go good. But at the end of the time, when they are doing the deal, when they are doing any deal, whether to raise the capital, whether to gain the client, I think, or whether to hire an employee, they will see the legal structure, and legal structure will be needed at every stage. I think I summarized it better. That this whole session will be about how to deal with the legal foundation that a startup should be made. So at every stage, because I have been a founder for last 2 to 3 years, and at every stage I have seen, there has been demand of anything related to like MOU, related to any particular legal structure, whether you are incorporated or not. Many people ask this question, but generally, what's the idea of an entrepreneur is to just build the product, because that's what he's passionate about. He's not very much passionate about all the other things, about the legal or about finance or about anything. So he's passionate about building the product. But along
Right.
with that, this foundation is also very much important. So, can you summarize it and give one liner, any one liner that you have, to the people who are starting anything or who are planning to start anything in their college?
Yeah, so I mean, I would just again, try and emphasize as much as possible on the importance of navigating through this legal landscape that we just spoke about, because again, having a legal landscape in place is extremely important. When we talk about legal landscape, we're referring to the overall laws and regulations, legal system that a company would need to comply with from its business operations perspective. In simple words, it's these set of rules and processes that the business would need to follow on a going forward basis. Of course, right from the time of getting it incorporated. And of course, the way to do it is you go about with your incorporation, you have the correct set of documents in place with regards to your contracts, agreements, MOU that you mentioned, have your intellectual property registered, protected. This in turn will also, like we've been discussing, ring fence the amount of risk and the liability that you will be undertaking on a personal level as well as at the corporate level. So all in all, yeah, it is going to be involving quite a bit of, you undertaking activities, the ones that we mentioned, but it's important to do that because like I said, compliance is not a one-day affair. It's an ongoing process that you have to undertake if you are looking at undertaking a business on a sustainable, basis.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's open the stage for the audience. If audience have any questions, I think Namrata, Usnaf, Jehan, Tanvi are here. If you guys have any questions, you can put up in the chat box, or you can just open up your videos and ask Rashna directly. It's very tough to recall any questions at the time of sessions, but if you have any question, please recall it and put it in the chat box.
I think I was very
Okay,
clear.
I think they enjoyed the session very much, and they yes, that's great. I hope you all enjoyed the session and had a very insightful insights from the Rashna about the startup building and how we can create a whole organized structure of the startups. Because as a startup founder, I can tell me we guys are very much disorganized, you know. But to create a whole organization, that's what we call it at the end. That it takes very much time, it takes very much effort and very much knowledge, specifically from the experts. And experts in every particular field is very much important. In this field, today we have Rashna on the stage, and she has told us about the legal expertise, that legal exposure that we should have in our life to build a whole organization and to make ourselves organized. Thank you, Rashna. Thank you very much for this session. And we can do another session on anything related to startups in the upcoming future, in the upcoming event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sandeep, for this opportunity. I hope this was helpful to the ones who would be, looking at the recorded session even after
Obviously,
sharing it.
because
So,
the
yeah.
exposure is very much important. Yes, exposure is very much important, and they are only exposed based on the reels, one-liners reels, two-liner reels, or they are exposed by seeing the news. Sometimes, which is not a news, is still spread as a news, But the real thing, the real talk, is not being very much thing, and it's tough, you know. So you have made it simpler, and that was the main agenda of this session, to make it simple for the students, to get an exposure. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.